will say that over the course of the past week and a half, we've kind of been on a roller coaster of emotions, both as a family and then also to a larger extent, we as a church family. As my dad lived his final days on earth, closed his eyes in death, and opened them gazing upon glory last Thursday. And when we go through stuff like that, most of us have gone through loss in our lives. It's easy to start thinking back and thinking of memories and thinking of moments, moments that really have an impact upon you. And I thought a lot about my kids. I remember leaving my dad's hospital room and holding hands and walking with Timmy and thinking that I was walking away from my dad for one of the final times. Holding the hand of my boy that's got so many decades of life ahead of him. Knowing that someday he may walk away hand in hand with his son away from me for the final time. And so there's been a lot of emotions and a lot of memories. Timmy has been praying for a miracle since my dad's diagnosis. And one of the toughest things that I did through this whole process was to inform Timmy that there was nothing more that the doctor could do. And I remember having a conversation with Timmy that, this can't lead us to a point where we blame God. This can't lead us to a point that we can, I think God can handle us not understanding. God can handle us even being mad or angry. But we can't rebel against God when we don't have something turn out the way that we want it to. And so I remember having that conversation with Timmy, and it's times like this that really test our faith. When something happens very personal to us, and we've been seeking God's involvement in the process. And so, it got me thinking about a moment that happened several years ago with me that I still remember to this day. While I was working at State Farm, most of you know I have another job while also pastoring our church, and spent 14 years working for State Farm. Worked as a marketing rep for a construction and restoration company now, but I spent years at State Farm, and I remember the time I spent with one of our customers, and his name was Robert. And Robert was in his early 60s, and he was a long-time customer of State Farm. And I first met Robert when he came into our office to inform us that his house, that I would later know that he lived in, or find out that he lived in for over 35 years, had completely burned to the ground that morning. And he came into my office that day. I remember the first time that we met, that I spent probably more than 3 hours with this man. I got his claim filed for his home loss, and I made some contacts with some contractors, attempting to get some folks out to what remained of his home, attempting to see what might be able to be salvaged from his home. I was able to cut him a check for $1,000 so he could at least go buy some clothes, because all he had was the clothes on his back that day. Even the shoes on his feet and some of the clothing was his neighbor's, because the fire woke him and his wife up from their sleep, and he had to leave the house barefooted, nothing but his pajamas that night. I remember being impressed with him that day that we initially met. A man that had pretty much lost all of his earthly possessions, seemed to not be fazed by the devastation of his circumstances. Now, don't get me wrong, Robert had not become a doormat for his insurance company. He was made sure throughout the process of having his home rebuilt that he would be made whole again. Slowly but surely, his home was rebuilt. months passed after that initial meeting that I had with Robert when we met again. I met with him several times throughout that period. But at that 6-month mark, I was able to submit his final personal property inventory as a State Farm Claims, and send it to the State Farm Claims Department. And that's really a process that your insurance company does. It makes you write down everything you lost. If you lost a pair of socks, you lost 12 pair of socks. You had to write socks, 12 pairs, and literally everything. And it's a painful process for somebody to go through. And I picked socks because when my dad passed away, my brother had to borrow a pair of socks, and he came downstairs and said, "Mom, do you know the fact that Dad has 5 drawers full of socks?" And it was like, yeah, he does. And so my dad literally had like 200 pairs of socks. But that's a side story. But he handed me 76 pages of a document that had like 25 line items on each page. And I faxed those 76 pages of documents detailing each and every item that he and his wife lost in that fire, which took about 45 minutes to fax. And for you young people, a fax is, okay, I won't go there. But I was able to spend some extended time speaking to Robert about all that he had experienced over the course of not only that 6 months following this fire, but actually over the course of the previous 3 years prior to that fire. See, Robert and his wife, his wife's name was Treasure. How precious is that name? Had one child. It was a son. And I will never forget his name because his name's Ken. And over the course of the 6 months that followed his fire, a period of time where Robert and I met on a regular basis, I came to find out that Robert Treasure's son, Tim, had passed away 3 years earlier. Tim had passed at the age of 33, and I still remember that he would be actually a year younger than me today if he were still alive. And as this man spoke of his dear son, personal loss that he and his wife experienced 3 years earlier, he spoke of losing his best friend, his fishing buddy, the person that brought so much joy to his life. But the thing that I saw from him throughout that 6-month period of time following his home fire continued to show through in this man as he spoke about the loss of his son. For a man that had experienced such great loss, he didn't seem to feel it. Keep in mind that this man not only lost his son, but he also lost the home that he raised his son in. He lost all of his stuff. I'm sure many of the things that he had lost had carried great memories of his deceased son. Then I heard him say it. Still remember it like it was yesterday. He said that the fire actually had been a blessing for him. He said it had been a blessing because it caused him to rely upon and trust completely in the Lord to provide for and protect him in his life. He spoke about how he felt God must have a plan to use the circumstances that he found himself in to accomplish something good in his life. And though I moved on from that work experience and quickly lost contact with Robert, I was privileged to speak to and work with a man in those moments that faced great trials in such a short period of time and had exhibited a perseverance that would be unexplainable if it had not been for his faith in his Lord and his trust in God's promises. I thought about Robert these past 2 weeks as I thought about the type of man that I would like to be when it comes to persevering in the face of trials. His story was a lot easier for me to tell this morning than my own. And the story of my loss of the man who raised me to be who I am today. The trials that he faced over the past 18 months. And the loss that I feel today so deep inside my soul that I feel even as I speak this morning. And probably they'll never go away. And though I know I can't say that my loss has been a blessing quite yet, and I may never be able to say that, I would like to think that the one thing that is pulling me through is my faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. As I try to trust in God's promises through the pain that I'm feeling in a moment by moment basis. In fact, I don't know how people who lack faith are able to deal with loss in any way that resembles a healthy manner. Which has directed me this morning to the opening words of the first chapter of the book of James. So if you have a Bible with you this morning, turn with me to James chapter 1. And this has been a passage that I've spoke from numerous times over my 20 plus years in ministry. But it's a passage that the Lord has brought me back into this week. And the plan is next week I'm going to get back into the Gospel of John with you and continue looking at the story of Jesus. But as I've shared with you throughout the past month or two is, I've preached all but about 2 Sundays over the course of the past 2 months. I'm grateful that Jeff was able and willing to pinch hit for me during those 2 Sundays. Sometimes life takes us away from the plan. And the plan had been the Gospel of John, the story of Jesus. And the story of Jesus is what's holding me together right now. The story of Jesus is what's holding my wife together, and my boys together, and my mom together, and my family together. The story of Jesus is what, brings joy in my heart knowing that my dad is in his very presence as we speak to him. But sometimes, life gets interrupted. And so as God is speaking to us, and especially as a minister, I got to believe that God is speaking to me in order for me to be able to help share His love with you as well when I stand before you. So, we haven't been in the Gospel of John for a while. But I hope that you've been hearing from Jesus as He's been speaking to me, and hopefully I've been allowing Him to speak through me to you over the course of the past few months as we've kind of gotten away from the Gospel of John and just allowed Jesus to speak to us through our circumstances. But today we do the same, looking at James chapter 1, beginning in verse 2. And the Word of God says this: "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." As we begin, looking at the beginning, as we look at the beginning of the chapter of James chapter 1, reflecting upon these 3 verses, initial 3 verses, verses 2, 3, and 4, we're told to view the trials that we face with great joy. That word trials that we see in verse 2 is an interesting word in the original Greek. It is the Greek word pyrakos. It means literally to put to proof by experiment or experience. So it really speaks to this idea that our experiences literally serve as evidence or proof of who we are and what we're becoming. In context, these experiences or experiments can serve as evidence or proof of our faith in God. For my friend Robert, the experiences of losing his son and then losing his home, all in the course of a short 3-year period of time, that could have been completely overwhelming, and that could have proved a faith that was lacking inside of him. But instead, his trust in God to provide and protect him during his trials never waned. And this verse can also go further to explain exactly why it seems as if Robert took the loss of his home in stride. James tells us that these trials produce in us a perseverance. Now, the word in the Greek can and we trust in God to really pull us through those circumstances, we become better suited when the next trial comes up. When additional trials occur in life, to place our trust in those moments in God to bring us through those difficulties. Now, I will tell you that they're coming. You may feel like, you know what, I'm good right now, and praise God for that. But they're coming, aren't they? The trials are ahead of you. The storms are brewing on the horizon. Missy and I went to Florida back at the beginning of July to celebrate 20 years of being married. And when we did that, we went to the beaches. We started in Orlando, and we went east, and we went west, and we went on both sides, and we spent time at the beaches, and we were kind of trying to, feel it out. Where do we want to take our kids to, and type of conversations that we were having. But it brought back to my mind when Missy and I, before Timmy was born, had gone on a trip to Florida, and we had been on the beach. It was a beautiful day. We were in Fort Lauderdale, and it was sunny and beautiful. And then all of a sudden, way off in the distance, we saw a cloud, and it was gruesome looking, right? And I'm like, hey, Miss, the cloud's out there. She's like, we're fine. This is great. Why not? All that stuff. And she's just loving the beach. And I'm like, I'm going to go back to the to the shore, and I'm going to kind of start getting some stuff together. And I see it coming closer, closer. She's like, that's nothing to worry about. When there were hundreds of people around, and then she's out there and she's having fun. I'm like, Missy, it's getting closer. Oh, it's okay. We'll be fine. I think that was about 4 or 5 interactions like this. And by this time, about the 4th interaction, I look around, and Missy and I are the only 2 people left on the beach. Literally, hundreds of people had gone away. And, I look up. I don't have to look off in the distance anymore. I look up, and it's like black as night. And I'm like, Missy, it's time to go. And she looks up and says, oh, man. And we didn't make it to the car before the skies just opened, and it was just a complete, utter mess. You think of those moments sometimes, and you think, sometimes that trial, that difficulty seems so far away because we're living in the moment and things just seem to be so good. But you know what? It sits out on the horizon. Sometimes it gets there a lot quicker than what we think it will. But when it gets there, are we going to be prepared? Are we going to be able to find our way through those difficult times? Are we going to be able to race our ways back to the rental car in order to be able to avoid the storm of life? Are we going to be able to find that shelter in Jesus? Because that's who He desires to be for us. He wants to pull us through those difficult times. He's there. He'll never leave us nor forsake us. We find Him standing at the door of our hearts, knocking sometimes when we are too busy, being preoccupied by life, to know that He's standing there and saying, stand at the door of your heart and knock. I want to be invited in. And even when we don't invite Him in those moments, He's still there to pick up the pieces when the storms of life. And hopefully, as we encounter those storms of life, it better prepares us to not leave Him out of the sunny, beautiful days, but also to know that He's building up in us a perseverance to be able to meet those next storms with joy and expectancy of knowing that He they lack nothing. And that will lack nothing that we need to persevere in the face of any type of trial. What I remember seeing from my friend Robert was a maturity that went well beyond his 60 years. A maturity and a commitment to trusting God no matter the circumstances. All because God has proven himself to Robert time and time again. So Robert knows of no reason that he shouldn't put all of his faith in God. Though Robert's trials might have been different from yours and mine, please know this morning that each and every one of us are confronted with these James 1-2 types of trials. And for each of us, we must ask how we're going to respond in the midst of these trials that we encounter and when we encounter them in our lives. Are we going to consider it pure joy as we deal with these proof-forming experiments or experiences, trusting in God to pull us through the difficulties that certainly accompany those moments of life? Are we going to learn from these experiences that we might be better suited again and again to persevere in the face of many trials and not allow for our faith in Him to wane? See, I saw maturity in my 9-year-old a week ago. That as I shared with him devastating news that was communicating that what he had been praying for all this time, for 18 months, was not going to turn out the way that he wanted it to turn out. I saw maturity in my son that's 9 years old. He said, "Dad, I'm going to go see Papaw." And we went and saw Papaw. And then I watched just how he interacted from that moment forward. You know who consoled me most at my dad's casket? My 9-year-old. There was a maturity that went way beyond his years. I don't know how he's had that many experiences with Jesus, but I've seen that maturity in him. And it's something that comes from retaining that information. I've seen God do this in my life in this moment. So when the next moment comes up, I can recall what He did here. And I can trust that what He's going to do in this moment is going to be no different than what He did over here. And then when it happens back here, now I've had 2 or 3 or 4 different moments. And I can trust that way over here, He's going to remain faithful. And so just like Robert, so many years ago in that interaction, how I saw just a maturity in him, in his faith, I saw it recently in my 9-year-old. And I've seen it in so many of you over the years, and you've seen it in one another. And you've seen it in your lives, and seen it in your spouse's lives, and you've seen it in the lives of those that are near and dear to you. But you've also seen the exact opposite. You've seen people respond when they don't have that faith. And there seems to be in so many of those moments a hopelessness that tugs at your heart. And so what that means is that when we see those things time and time and time again in our lives, we have to find ways to offer that hope to a hopeless people that we interact with so often in life. What are the trials that you face? No matter the difficulty, you don't have to face those challenges. Know that Jesus Christ is with you. And He'll never leave you nor forsake you. difficulties and how you deal with them and how you allow God to work in your life in the midst of what specific storm of life you might find yourself in right now, all can serve as proof of a strong faith. It can produce in you a perseverance to overcome the next storm that is surely on the horizon. My friend Robert knew that firsthand. So many of us in this room this morning can speak of such situations and how our faith was strengthened as a result of that perseverance that God produced in our lives. There's a promise that God offers, which James speaks of later in this same chapter, for those that persevere. Skip down with me in our text of verse 12. James says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him." You'll just keep that up on the screen for the rest of the time. We'll persevere under trial, proving our faith to be strong. Having stood or passed the testing of our faith, the promise of the Lord is that we will receive the crown of life. This is one of the two places in the Bible that we read about this crown of life. The other is found in Revelation chapter 2 in the letter to the church in Smyrna. Now there are really two sides of belief when it comes to this idea of the crown of life. It tends to divide at the spiritual fork in the road dealing with eternal security. Those that believe in eternal security, which tends to be a basic tenet of Baptist doctrine, believe that it refers to more than just heaven, but actually speaks to the rewards that some will receive in heaven. But others that are not comfortable with the doctrine of eternal security, this idea of, once you become a believer that you're always saved, believe that this reference to a crown of life simply references the reward of heaven itself, and that heaven will only be rewarded to those that exhibit this type of perseverance that James speaks about in our text today. From whatever perspective you look at this verse and this idea of the crown of life, you can still see the importance of practicing this type of faith and this type of perseverance in the face of trials. Because there's a reward that awaits you. Who doesn't like persevering for the reward? You want to hand somebody a reward, they'll probably gladly take it. And in our day and time of, everybody gets a trophy and everybody gets a ribbon and everybody gets participation, that may be where we're headed. But you know what? There's something special about working towards something and knowing that there's a prize at the end. Being able to persevere in the many trials that we face in life, knowing that there's a great reward ahead of us someday in heaven, should not only bring great comfort to us, but it also should produce in us this joy that James speaks about in our text. It's a crown that my dad wears now, that the Lord Jesus placed upon his head last Thursday. And it's a crown that awaits you and I as we remain faithful. As we choose not to say, you know what, God, you didn't give me what I wanted. I've been begging for it for so long. So now in the face of you not giving me what I want, I'm going to rebel against you. No. It's a prize, it's awarded to the person that says, you know what, I see you at work here. And so when this next thing comes up, I can just recall what you did back here. And I can trust that you're going to pull me through this moment. And then when the next moment arises, you prove to yourself faithful time and time again. And it's knowing that you don't have the strength, and neither do I, to make it through those moments fully intact on our own. I don't know about you, but I've rediscovered over the course of the past 2 weeks, over the course of the past month, over the course of the past 18 months, that I just don't have it in me to make it through those moments on my own. So I can trust in the one that has pulled me through, sometimes has drugged me through kicking and screaming, to be there to pick me up, to dust me off. You may not like hearing this, but the athlete in me says to pat me on the rear end and to tell me to get back in. Because it's only because of him that I can stand before you today and share confidently from his word. That he's going to show up in those moments of your life too. And it may not seem like it, but he's there. And when we don't discover him there, it's because we've become so internally focused on ourselves that we're not looking for him in those moments. And you know what? You're never going to hear me call upon judgment on you because you're internally focused in those moments, because those moments are tough in life. But all I can do is encourage you to gain the proper perspective in those moments. Will you open up your spiritual eyes and spiritual ears to see how God is showing up in those moments? And I'm one, you've heard me say this before, I'm one that doesn't believe that God orchestrates those moments necessarily. Because I think really bad things happen to really good people. And it's not like God's like, zap, zap. You know, I don't think that. But I believe when life zaps us, God shows up in the midst of those moments. And he doesn't expect you to go at it alone. God will certainly reward this type of battle testing. On a February day in 1988, a group